Hey, good morning. Happy Sabbath to everybody. It's Sunday morning and I feel like I have a lot to say today. So I'm going to get right to it. I'm here in my garage, which doubles. I never use my garage for my car. My car is outside, soaking wet, and the sunroof broke. So really, there's probably water coming in. There's not a thing I can do about it because I'm not parking it in here. This is my space. So I don't think I've ever in my life used a garage actually for what it's intended, but that's okay. So I'm here working on some encaustic things, and I feel myself lately so drawn toward the discards, all the scraps and pieces and fragments of discarded or finished creative process. So, I've been working on trees, which there's usually a lot of leftover scraps of copper and wire and papers, and I've been setting them aside, and that happens with all sorts of things. So, this past week, people came to my studio and we made these. These are Protestant prayer beads. So, and I can explain these to you at some point, but they're intended to be a tactile aid in prayer. And for me, and for probably most of us, our mind wanders as we attempt to connect with God. So this kind of helps us keep our mind and body present during prayer. That's the intention for it. Anyway, we made these last week in the studio. And so there were these beautiful leftovers. Sherry, one of the ladies that made one of these, she pulled apart a beautiful strand of beads. I think they're vintage old beads, glass beads, and all these, like, I don't know if you can see that. I can't really. All these little pieces of the chain came off in little pieces, and I was so drawn to that. And with my tree, so I gathered up all these like discarded pieces. There's this paper. People were in my studio a week or two ago, and we were doing encaustic things, and there's just like loads and loads of this paper, just torn paper pieces. And most people would probably throw them away, and I've probably thrown things away that are too little to use, but for whatever reason this time around I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just really drawn to these little pieces of lost whatever. And as I began to do the work of the Enneagram, past episodes I talk about the Enneagram, which is a personality model, but it goes deeper than that. It's much richer than that. It's not just the what of human behavior, it's the why. And so as we begin to explore that, we become more self-aware, and we realize, and in the words of Christopher, I don't know how to say his last name, Hewarts. We'll just go with Hewarts. He's written this book, The Sacred Enneagram, and his language around the Enneagram is that we stepped out of the garden at some point in our lives, and our attempt at getting back becomes our personality. And so what we're really after is looking for the way home, the way back home to your true self. All that to say is that I really think that as adults we can look back at our lives and realize that we've lost parts of ourselves along the way, or maybe they were injured, maybe they've been forgotten, stuffed down, whatever. And so I think that a lot of our adult lives are spent attempting to gather those fragments back so that we can be whole people. And that's really what what we desire. And I think that's what God desires for us. And we can be on a collaborative process, creative process with Him in gathering back our parts and becoming whole people. So I started this Encaustic piece. It's not finished, but what it's becoming for me is a picture of my own process of gathering my parts back. So all of this pretty much is made from fragmented pieces of art or discarded things. So the first layer is an old piece of paper towel that I used to actually wipe clean my griddle. And so it had this beautiful green paint and wax on it just as a result of wiping my griddle clean. And I kept the paper towel. So it's on the bottom layer. You can see that. And then all of these other things. This watering can right here is made from scraps of paper that I found in my studio this week from people being here and cutting them up. And I just gathered some. And then pouring out of the watering can are those old pieces of jewelry. I'm going to turn it sideways just so I can hold it up so you can kind of see that. Can you see it? They're the old pieces of jewelry chain that created these really beautiful shapes and little fragments. So they're embedded into the wax. And then this week when I was running, I found these old flowers. They're dead, right? They're it's the middle of winter here in Middle Tennessee, and this is what you find on anything. It's all brown. There's not a lot of green, of course, but I stopped mid-run because I thought these were so beautiful. The negative space they create up in the sky against the backdrop of the sky caught my eye. And then when I walked up close to them, they're just beautiful. They're, I don't know, there's just something to me that's beautiful about them. And then a little further along, I was running past a grove of pine trees, conifers, and there was all this beautiful old pine, discarded again. These used to be green, and now they're not. They're good old brown. But there was something beautiful, and they still smell so good. So I picked up a bunch of those. And so this piece is, again, down here at the bottom, there's some fragmented pieces of paper. I didn't do anything to these except pick them up off of the table that they were on. Well, and I kind of brushed the edges with some ink just to give them a little definition. But I wanted to keep them in their pieces. These are all fragmented pieces. I'm not doing anything to them. I'm just gathering them as I find them, and they're just broken pieces. So, yeah, and then there's a couple pieces of sewing pattern here. That's what's on here. And they're just puzzle pieces. And what I wanted to do was look at how all of these pieces, these fragmented pieces that feel like they're kind of untethered out in the universe waiting to be found, feels like me. And I feel like in some ways I'm being reinvented, that we are constantly at work creating ourselves. God is constantly at work with us creating